Welcome back to another Q&A episode, which, as I've mentioned in the previous ones, runs sort of like a podcast. So this is audio only, so if you're staring at the screen right now, stop doing that, go work on your guitars, and just listen and follow along as I answer these questions. And we've done a couple of these Q&A episodes now, so I'd really like to know from you guys if you're enjoying this type of content, because personally for me, I'm really enjoying doing this type of content, and if you could just give me some feedback, let me know in the comments what you think of these types of episodes. Also, when you have questions, please go ahead and post those in the comments as well. Or if you're a member of the online guitar building school, just post them in the members forum. So without further ado, let's get straight into those questions. So this question is from David, and I'm not going to read the question because the way that it's written, I just don't think it'll make a lot of sense that way. I'll just explain what the question is. David is asking about what I do when I lay out my side slats to prevent bending them either upside down or inside out, so that that seam at the end wedge doesn't end up looking off. You get that nice seamless book match at the end seam if you get this right. And so I'm assuming that we're talking about machine bending here and not hand bending, just because this is definitely more of a problem you get when you're machine bending your sides, because you can't really see the grain of the sides while you're passing it through the bending process, whereas you can really pretty clearly see what is going on when you're hand bending. So here's what I do to keep track of the sides. First, I just lay out the side slats in a book match, the same way you would for your plates when you're book matching and joining the plates. And now with the side slats sitting in that book matched position, I'll write the word show on each side. And that's just to tell me in a very explicit way that this is the show face. Of course, you can write whatever you want to remind you that that's the show face. I just like to write the word show. And then the other thing I need to mark is which side is the top, so I'll point two little arrows pointing inward towards the meeting of that book match, and those arrows indicate that that is the top, or the edge of the sides that will meet with the top. And when those side slats are held in the book matched position, those two arrows should be pointing inward towards each other. Then I mark where the waist is with a line, and I mark where the end of the upper bout is and the end of the lower bout. And now the real trick here to not get things flipped around is to pull that waistline onto the parchment paper when I'm wrapping it in parchment paper, and then again I pull that line using a marker onto the aluminum foil when I'm wrapping it in aluminum foil. It's real easy, and this is, I think, where people get tripped up through that process of wrapping the side. Some people just wrap it in aluminum foil, and that's fine. I do 2 wraps, parchment paper, then aluminum foil. But either way, when you wrap it and you can no longer see the grain and everything you wrote onto the side in order to lay it out, that's where you end up accidentally flipping it upside down or something like that. So I just very carefully, I keep a marker with me, and as I'm wrapping, I pull that waistline onto the parchment paper and then again onto the aluminum foil. Then I place it in the thermal blanket sandwich there with the metal slats and bend away on the bending machine. So I hope that makes sense. It's a little hard to answer that in an audio-only format, but I think the way I explained it, hopefully you can imagine that visually. I do show this in the online course, Building an OM Acoustic, so if you have that course, you can check it out there and get a more visual example of what I'm talking about. And this question comes from the members forum. It's from Jay. Jay writes, I want to get your take on using Spanish cedar for the neck. I read they use it for classical guitars, but not sure if anyone uses it for steel string guitars. So I've never used Spanish cedar for a guitar neck myself, but I have used Port Orford cedar, which is similar, and obviously still a cedar. And the neck end of the guitar is, of course, way lighter in your hands, which feels really good if you're into that sort of lighter feeling guitar, and I assume that might be why you're interested in the Spanish cedar for that same reason. And I have heard of other steel string builders using Spanish cedar with apparently good results. So there is some precedent there. So I would say that yes, you can absolutely use Spanish cedar. If you wanted to be on the most conservative side, though, I would stick with Honduran mahogany just because it's sort of the tried and tested wood for acoustic steel string guitars. Definitely has the best stiffness to weight ratio, although Spanish cedar is really good as well and really just marginally different from Honduran mahogany. More so, the reason I say that if you're being conservative to stick with the Honduran mahogany is actually the mahogany's workability is really great when it comes to carving the neck. It's going to make that step a lot easier if this is your first guitar, and then maybe you can tackle something like a Spanish cedar neck on your second or third or further down the line when you have a little more experience with it. Or not, if you just want to jump into the deep end of the pool and try something a little bit different with a Spanish cedar neck, then you can do that as well. But to answer your question, Spanish cedar, I think, should be fine as far as its ability to hold up under the constant pull of the strings. And I'm saying this based on my experience with Port Orford cedar. And one more thing I want to add to that, whenever you're using less than optimal or something different from the standard wood for a neck, what I like to do is inlay 2 carbon fiber strips on either side of the truss rod. Now, if this is your first guitar, this might be just a little bit more of an advanced thing that you might not want to add to your plate right now. So that's something to think about. But if it's not your first guitar, it's a great way to take some of the worry out of using different neck wood like Port Orford cedar. Like the Port Orford cedar guitar that I built, I used those reinforcing carbon fiber rods. So when I say that the Port Orford cedar holds up really nicely, I want to be clear and add that I did reinforce a little bit more than I normally do with just the truss rod. The purpose of those carbon fiber rods, by the way, isn't just to add more strength to the truss rod. The truss rod is plenty strong itself in that longitudinal direction of the neck. The real benefit to those carbon fiber rods is that it prevents twisting. It adds lateral strength rather than longitudinal strength. So if you've ever sighted down a guitar neck and noticed that it's twisted when you look, say, on the bass side, but then you look on the treble side and there isn't as much or any relief, that's a case where the neck has warped laterally, and so it's twisting, rather than what you typically see, which is the neck simply pulling and bowing forward, but with a uniform amount of bowing. So to deal with that twisting, carbon fiber rods. Anyway, let's move on from that one. This question comes from the members forum, and it's from Ron. Ron writes, I've made a nice new bending machine, bought a heating blanket, and I'm all ready to bend my sides. The wood is mahogany with a good straight grain, nothing fancy. My question is, how much soaking does it need for a good bend? Do I put it in a water tank or just use a spray bottle? That's a great question, Ron. I've bent more mahogany than any other wood. And what I always do is I put it in the water tank. So I soak it for 15 minutes in hot water. The spray bottle I reserve for usually just things with figure, where I don't want too much moisture to cause the figure in the grain to separate. So yeah, for straight grain mahogany, just boil up some water, put it in a fish tank or a tub, and put your sides in there and just wait 15 minutes. Take the sides out, and they'll be good to go for bending. Okay, and that's all the questions that I have for now. Thanks for listening. You guys are the best. If you have any questions for a future Q&A episode, just post them in the YouTube comments, or if you're a member of the Online Guitar Building School, post them in the members forum. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye for now.
If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video every Friday. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.